So you don't have to shout or anything, just talk normal.
Okay. Thank you, everyone. Can you hear me okay? No? Okay, I'll talk louder. How's that? Okay. My name is Tammy Mal, and I am a true crime writer. And basically, I like to write historical crime from Pennsylvania.
I have a microphone. Would you like that? Oh, it's okay.
I'm fine. I'm fine.
Thank you.
Okay, a lot of times today, when a sensational or a bizarre crime happens, you'll hear people say, you know, wow, I don't know what's happening. Stuff like this never happened when I was a kid. You know, it wasn't like this years ago. But the truth of the matter is, crime has always happened. Bizarre crime, brutal crime, goes all the way back to the Bible and the story of Cain and Abel. I think all of us could probably agree that the most heartbreaking crime would be the murder of a child. And in my first book, Little Girl Lost, the true story of the Vanling murder, I write about the murder of a child, the murder of 9-year-old May Barrett. I think something that's almost as tragic as the murder of a child is when the killer turns out to be a child himself. This is Myron Simonchik, 13 years old. He is the one who killed May Barrett. I have written about 2 child murderers, Myron and this boy, also 13 years old, Elmer Washburn. Myron and Elmer's crimes were complete opposites. Myron killed a 9-year-old female child. Elmer killed a 90-year-old Civil War veteran. Their motives were completely opposite as well. Myron's was a sex crime. Elmer killed for sheer greed at 13 years old. The other thing that really fascinated me about these 2 kids was how cunning they were for their age and for the time that they committed their crimes. Myron killed in 1945, Elmer in 1922. And I have written about a lot of killers, and the cunning of these 2 could rival any adult killer I've ever written about. And I don't want to give the story away because, of course, I want you to read my book. But they were extremely smart and extremely devious. My second book is also about a cunning killer, although not a child. Disposable Income, a true story of sex, greed, and imperfect murder. The killer in this book, although cunning, as I said, was not a child. This is Charlie Homeyer, a con man who got his victims through the Lonely Hearts Club ads of the old magazines. And how he was successful, I do not know, but he was successful.
He's not a star, is he?
Charlie Homeyer committed his crime in Factoryville near Tunkhannock. And as the title suggests, imperfect murder, there is a cat in the story which actually plays a very big role in solving this crime. It's pretty interesting. Now, out of anyone I've ever written about, I have gotten the most inquiries about Charlie Homeyer, mainly from people doing genealogy. The Homeyers were a very big family. He has a lot of relatives still out there. I've heard from many. One of them that I heard from was his grandson, and he had some really interesting stories to tell me. And one of them kind of shows that Charlie's con was a little bit passed down to his own son, but in a funny way. Charlie Homeyer had met a woman named Helen First through the Lonely Hearts. He married her bigamously, He got her pregnant, he swindled her out of her life savings, and then he left her. The child that was born to her was Robert Homeyer. And this is a spoiler alert in the book. Charlie Homeyer was executed for his crime. And at the time, his son Robert, who he had never met his father, didn't know anything about him, but he was in the Army stationed in Alaska. And he happened just by chance to be reading a newspaper which had an article about his father's impending execution. So he told his son he viewed it as an opportunity. So he told him he cut up a bunch of onions, smelled them till he was sobbing like a baby, went to his superiors with the newspaper article, and Robert Homeyer ended up getting a hardship leave because of the, I thought that story was hysterical. Another thing about Charlie that was very interesting is this Helen First, who he had married and swindled. She had 2 children by a previous marriage. One of them was a little girl who, of course, became Robert's half-sister and Charlie Homeyer's stepdaughter. This little girl grew up to be a famous actress. She worked for many, many years as the postmistress on the hit show Little House on the Prairie, Ruth Foster. That was Charlie Homeyer's stepdaughter. I wish so bad that I had had these stories before I wrote the book, and that always happens. Whenever I put out a book, I always hear from people who give me information that would have been just perfect for the book. And it's a shame that you can't get it before, but sometimes you just can't. Now for my 3rd book, I went in an altogether different direction. My 3rd book is Tortured Minds, Pennsylvania's Most Bizarre but Forgotten Murders. And this is a book with 4 stories that examine just that. People with tortured minds. I think we've all heard of the Salem witch trials from the 1600s. I don't know, though, how many of you know that Pennsylvania had its own brush with the supernatural and the occult. Even today, when you drive down into what's known as Pennsylvania Dutch country, you can still see the strange symbols that adorn the farmhouses and the barns. And of course, I'm talking about the hex signs. Now, the hex originated in the dark forests of Europe and was brought to this country, the idea of it, about 200 years ago by early German settlers. And the hex, of course, is the belief that people have the power to cast spells, to turn the evil eye on you, to, put a hex on you. And these hexes can wreak havoc in your life. They can cause illness. They can cause tragedy, misfortune. Now, the only way a person could know whether it was actually a hex that was causing their misfortune or something else was to see a powwow doctor. They would be the only ones who could tell you. And of course, the powwow doctors were also the only ones who could break the hex. And they would do that with potions and magical charms and amulets. And so as a result, a lot of people made a lucrative living as powwow doctors, but often to the detriment of their patients. This young man is named Albert Shinsky. He spent almost his entire life incarcerated in institutions for the criminally insane because of his belief in the hex. Because his belief in the hex turned Albert Shinsky into a killer. He killed the person who he believed put the hex on him. And it's a very sad story. In Tortured Minds, I write about 2 hex murders, Albert Shinsky and a more local one that happened down around Kingston. I also, in this book, there is a story about a ghost that helped to solve a crime, and a story about a young man who I firmly believe would have became one of Pennsylvania's first serial killers had he not been caught when he was. It's a fascinating book, fascinating stories, which I think you would really enjoy. My fourth book I did is Murder in Susquehanna County. And this too is a book with 4 stories, crimes from Susquehanna County. Elmer Washburn's story is in this book. And so is the oldest case I ever wrote about, which was the 1873 murders of Margaret and Mary O'Mara from New Milford. That's one of the reasons that my passion is to write historical crime. Because Margaret and Mary O'Mara have been dead for 143 years, and nobody even knows they existed. Their murder was horrific. It was one of the most brutal murders I've ever written about, and nobody even knows it happened. Nobody knows about the tragedy that befell the entire O'Mara family, and it was a tragedy for the entire family. It was very sad. And writing about these people gives them a voice. It lets everybody know that these people lived, you know? They were just like you and me. They were living their lives, they had dreams, they had hopes, and because of murder, that was all cut short. And I like people to know that. I like people to remember these people, because there's nobody else to do it. But as much as I love writing historical true crime, to start a career by writing it is very, very difficult, because publishers don't want to hear about old cases. They want current cases, they want new cases. And quite honestly, I don't understand that, because as a true crime reader and being friends with many, many true crime readers, it doesn't matter to us when it happened. You know, if the story is interesting, we want to read about it. But publishers don't take that view. So for my 5th book, I decided to try something different. I wrote a more current case. Now this book is scheduled to be released on November 1st of this year. You can get it on pre-order from Amazon right now, but it will be in bookstores in November. This book deals with the disappearance and murder of Joanne and Alex Katranak, a young mother and her infant son from Catasauqua, Pennsylvania, 10 days before Christmas, 1994. 4 months later, the bodies of Joanne and Alex were found in a wooded area 15 miles from their house. Joanne had been shot and beaten, and Alex had been either suffocated or simply left to die of exposure. It was a brutal and horrific crime. It was terrible. After a 3-year investigation, the police finally made an arrest, and it was pretty startling, because they arrested 33-year-old Patricia Rohrer, a young mother herself, who lived 550 miles away in the state of North Carolina, but who had also been Joanne Katranak's the ex-girlfriend of Joanne Katranak's husband. And to make a long story short, the police found 6 hairs in Joanne's car, one of which had a root, which they DNA tested and matched to Patricia Rohrer. Case closed. At least I thought it was case closed. I decided it would also make a very good book. It was just so bizarre. You know, the 3-year investigation and the psychotic ex-girlfriend who drives 500 miles to kill the new wife and baby. It was crazy. So I decided I was going to write the book, and I sat down and I wrote letters to all the main players. I wrote to Patricia Rohrer. She answered me very quickly. She had always maintained her innocence. She was eager to talk. She said, I didn't do this, you know. I also wrote to Joanne's family, and I wrote to her widowed husband, and I wrote to her in-laws, but I didn't get a reply from any of them. What I got instead was a phone call from a Detective Joe Vasquez with the Lehigh County Prosecutor's Office. And his first words to me were, what do you want to go digging into this case for? Nobody wants you looking into this case. Nobody wants this case brought back up. And it kind of floored me because the first thought that went through my head was, why? What's in there that you don't want me to find, you know? Well, as it turned out, there was a lot. I began investigating this case 6 years ago, and my research came from more than 10,000 Pennsylvania State Police reports, FBI files, lab results, court documents, the 6,500-page trial transcript. And I found in there just a myriad of problems. I found contaminated evidence that was used to convict this woman. I found witnesses who were beneficial to her that the police simply ignored and never told her attorneys about. I found suspects with much better motives who had failed polygraphs, who had no alibis, who were simply never cleared but just dismissed. I mean, over and over and over again, I found problems. So in 2013, I sent out Freedom of Information Act requests for documents on the case. And it took 2 years, but after 2 years, in 2015, I received 300 files from the FBI. And one of those files was about the hair that was used to convict Patricia, those 6 hairs that were found in the car. Only this file said not one of those hairs had a root. And she was, she was supposedly convicted from DNA from a root. So it was like she was convicted on a piece of evidence that did not exist. Well, that report was enough to get an attorney to come aboard pro bono. He is now working for her free of charge. She does have an appeal pending in Superior Court. It also interested 2 producers with NBC who contacted me and through my research did a 2-hour documentary geared towards her wrongful conviction, which I interviewed for. It was hosted by Dateline NBC's Keith Morrison, and it just aired in March. And incredibly, just yesterday, I got a phone call from a producer with a show called Daily Crime Watch, which is on Channel 16 every afternoon. They too are interested now in looking into the case and doing a show on her potential wrongful conviction. So this, which was supposed to just be a story about a case that was solved and closed, has really turned into something incredible. It also did finally get me an agent and a major publishing house, which I'm very happy for. And I am very much hoping that if it does well, they will consider publishing some historic crime, because that is my passion. That's what I love to write. And so basically, in conclusion, when you hear people say stuff like this never happened years ago, do not believe them, because it did. Crime has always happened, and unfortunately, it always will. I want to thank you for coming. Does anybody have any questions?
Is it always easy to have access to the files from the police, or do you always have to go through that long wait?
The police files are not public record. Therefore, they can tell you, no, we're not giving you anything. Court documents are public record, so you can always get them. But yeah, the police files are very hard. I was very lucky with this case in that Patricia Rohrer had her whole discovery file. So she had all the police reports. She had all the FBI files. And I got them from her, because the Pennsylvania State Police would not even talk with me. They would not interview with me. They would not talk with me. They wanted nothing to do with me. So I was lucky.
Is there a reason that they want to keep those files, hidden, or whatever you want to call it?
I think sometimes it's simply because there is stuff in there that's beneficial to the person. And I think sometimes they just don't, it can be confusing for anybody, because they could have a guilty person here, but they could also have stuff that tends to make them look pretty good, So I think as far as like the public, they would prefer just to stick with the case they are building. And I think that's probably a big reason why.
But after the case is closed, wouldn't you think that it should be available?
I would, and that's why I was so very surprised when I got that phone call from the Lehigh County Prosecutor's Office, because it's like she had been in jail already for 15 years. It was done. It was over. So why do you care that I want to look into this? Like, that's what I didn't understand, and it made me suspicious. I mean, I will admit that. As soon as he said that to me, I became like, something's wrong here. Because if it was such a great case, I mean, if you said to me, she did it, I would hand you the case file and say, if you can show me, I'll accept that, you know? So, yeah, I don't know why they're so secretive, except, I don't know.
Knowing you as I do, and knowing the many hours that she doesn't even speak of that she puts into this, and the heart and the soul, what got you to even start writing many years ago?
Start writing itself?
Start writing about these crime stories.
Well, I have always written. I've written since I was 5 years old and learned how to write. It's been something that I've just always done. Even when I was a little kid, I was writing books and stories. I mean, they were pretty pathetic, but I just always did it. But it was actually when I was about 10 years old. My mother had read the book In Cold Blood by Truman Capote, classic. And I sneaked it and I read it. And I was hooked. That was it. True crime was my thing from then on. And I never really read anything else. I just was fascinated. And so that's what did it.
I don't think anyone here realizes the amount of hours and time that you put into.
It is a lot of work. It is a lot of work.
An amazing thing, and then put it into a book so everybody else can read it.
When I tried to research the O'Mara murders, they were the hardest thing I've ever researched because there was nothing on them. I went up to the Susquehanna County Courthouse and I asked them about records, and she said to me, she said, well, you're gonna have to go look for them yourself. So she put me in a room, this little room. It was about 30 degrees hotter than it is right now. And it was floor to ceiling like that, but with boxes. And everything was dirty and dusty and filthy. And I was in there for probably 5 hours. I was black when I came out, you know, I was sweating so bad. But I found the O'Mara file from 1873, still in the courthouse archives. So it is a lot of work, but if you like to do it, it's fun. It's kind of like Maureen said about, you know, this is the one job she hates to leave. That's how I feel about research. I love to do it.
Excuse me. Did you leave us with the impression she's going to get a new trial the last day we talked about?
I think she is. I really do. I think she's going to get at least an evidentiary hearing to put on the new evidence that she's found. Because, you know, it wasn't only the report that I found, but the Allentown news station did an interview with her attorney after he filed that appeal. And within 30 minutes of that interview, he got a phone call from a retired police officer who told him that the officer who had responded first to this missing person had lied on the stand and had been told to lie if he wanted to continue working in law enforcement. So there's even more to it, and I think she will get an evidentiary hearing where she can put on evidence. Will it overturn her conviction? I don't know.
Would you say about 20 years now?
She's been in there a little over 20 years now, and she's lost everything since she's been in there. Her parents have died. She had a 15-month-old daughter, which she has not had contact with since she was 5 years old. She has nobody, like, you know, no family left. Everybody's gone.
There's something that infuriates me a little bit. Well, it has been bothering me. Probably bothering everybody in the community. Whatever happened to the evidence on that Barron murder? Well, I'm going to say murder. can't say that. The fellow that's missing from Old Forge. Have you heard anything on that?
Now, which one is that?
It's still happening.
Oh, was that the one with the, where they found the, they think it might be a mob hit or something, right?
Well, yeah, that one. And then there's the infamous one about the young woman that went missing by the Cathedral Cemetery maybe about 30 years ago.
Jolene Lakey?
That's,
Oh, no, that's another one. That's coming close. This young lady would have been about, let's say, I'm going to say, conjecture, 20 years old. She had her glasses, her...
is that the one they found her car abandoned?
yeah.
Okay,
That fascinates me.
I do remember that one.
Yeah, they put on a, situation where they're going to check the old part of the Cathedral Cemetery and check with the bishop to do it and all, went through all the thing and it was written in the paper. And then all of a sudden, nothing. Her poor father would go every day looking for her. After about 8, 9 years, he died. He lived on the corner of Gibson Street and North Washington.
That has got to be the worst, not knowing.
Yeah.
I mean, as terrible as it is to find out that your child or somebody you love has been murdered, to not know, for them to just be missing, that has got to be the worst. How can any family get closure when someone is just, you don't know what happened. You don't know if they're alive or dead. It's terrible.
Another famous murder was the Spangenberg murder. Remember that?
I don't remember that one.
It's an interesting one. He's supposed to be completely insane, and he did this. And I always think of when I hear of Lake Spangenberg, but that was a Spangenberg murder. I don't know the particulars on that. I'm great on that, reading that, and then there's that Lakey.
Well, yeah, there's a billboard down there on 81, $5,000 reward.
Yeah?
So I'm gonna look into that and see what I can do.
Well, that's the sad thing about writing this kind of stuff. You never run out of subjects.
No.
And it's sad because you don't. They're plentiful, they're everywhere. And it's really amazing what one human being can do to another.
There was a famous murder back, let me see, we're going to say 40 years ago. I could be wrong. I knew the woman that was involved with it when they discovered what happened. A cat discovered the man that committed the murder. And that was on the Shady Lane Road in Clarksville. He killed his wife and put her under the cement in the basement.
No, that's my Factoryville book.
Oh, is it?
Yeah, it is.
And then the set of knives that were used for cutting the summer of the Easter ham. I knew the whole family.
Did you really?
How about that one, the guy cut up his wife with a hatchet in the 50s up by Jefferson Township?
Oh yeah, you told me about that one.
Gotta get more information on that one.
Yeah.
It's some very interesting. And then we have the situation. I guess they don't call that prison for the criminally insane anymore. But we had some very unusual people that came out of there.
Oh yeah.
I know of one man. He's about 94 now, and he committed some bad.
Tammy, in your books, do you find a lot of corruption or a lot of evidence, things that aren't presented in courts that should be, and things like that, things that they pass by that the normal person wouldn't know?
Like hidden stuff they keep.
Or stuff they don't put into a trial that they should, and do you find a lot of that?
I have found a lot, like in this case. Now, the old cases I'm working just from the court records, so what wasn't in there I don't really know about, you know?
You said you talked to families after. Have you ever thought about writing a book to follow up on some of the stories?
Most of them contact me for information. Like, they don't have information about it, so they'll contact me and say, I didn't even know about this, can you tell me about it? So most of them don't have a lot of information. So.
Are you working on anything new?
I'm working on a very big one from right here, which I'd prefer not to say tonight. But it is very big. You all will have known it, and I think you'll be very interested to read it when it's
When's that one due out?
probably 5 years from now. I just started, so.
What about that Freechin Keene murder? You read about that? Here's the book out.
Yep.
12 copies in the library are left.
Well, most of my books are in the libraries too. I do have books here if anybody wants to buy one. And I'm sorry, did you have a question?
From inception, like from the first idea that you're going to write about one, how long does it usually take you to do the research and then be done with the book?
Most of them take probably about a year and a half from start to completion. So, and then like I said, this newest one I've been working on for 6 years. So, but like I said, that one's different, you know. I don't have police reports from these. These are basically newspaper articles and court documents. So they're a little easier.
How about the girl that was burned between the buildings at the University of
I'm
Strange?
sorry.
I just wanted to say, well, ever since I saw you on Investigation Discovery,
Did you see it?
but getting back to, again, Patricia Roller, you must be very hopeful knowing that you're gaining this kind of attention and people are starting to like look into it. You must feel like you're gaining some momentum here with that story.
Absolutely, yes. And I told her from day one, I thought what her case needed was attention. I said, you know, you're a monster. If you Google her name, oh my God, she is a monster. And so much of what's in that case never was made public. People don't know it. And I kept telling her that. And it's really kind of strange because lawyers will advise no publicity, no publicity, no publicity. And I don't know why. Because in a case like hers, publicity is the only thing that's going to help her, you know? So I don't know what's going to happen with her case, though.
Don't believe everything you read in the newspaper.
Some trivia. The district attorney in your Susquehanna book, William Jessup, he became a judge. The town right across the river here, Jessup, is named for him.
Really?
That's right.
I didn't know that. Well, thank you. That's a good fact to know. Anybody else?
Are there any murders that you started to research and you just couldn't find enough information to write a book?
Yes. Yes, I've had that happen actually quite often, yeah. And that is one of the reasons why, like, this book and The Tortured Minds have 4 stories. Because they're good stories, but they're not enough for one book, you know? So that's why I decided I would put 4 of them in one. And yeah, there are quite a few, though, where there's just not enough for a book. Anybody else?
Do you ever help the police with current cases or something that's maybe 10, 15 years old?
No, I've never worked with the police. And as far as, I know she introduced me as having been a member of the state police. I was not a state trooper. I was, however, I had applied and I was accepted as a state trooper cadet. And I did go to the academy, but I never finished it. I never graduated. So I did not work as a state trooper, but it was something that I had very much considered a career in. I'm sorry, did you have a question?
I was going to ask you, in your latest book, has she seen your interview?
She has. She has seen it.
I was so impressed.
She was very, very happy with the show. And in fact, she's down at Muncie, SCI Muncie, and they are showing it to lifer groups, which is pretty, just to kind of give them encouragement. And so they're taking like the lifer women there, 10 at a time, and they're taking them in and they're letting them watch the video, the 2-hour documentary. So, and I actually, my mailman must think because I've gotten like, 50 letters from female inmates there just saying, oh, we saw your show, It's like, keep thinking what the mailman must think, but anyways, it's nice. I'm glad that at least it's given them some kind of, I don't think they have much in there. So watching that, any little bit of, I guess, hope or whatever is good. So, anybody else?
The Robert Curley murder, did you ever do anything on that?
That was a fascinating case. Yeah, she got out.
The guy who gets her next.
Yeah, right.
She poisoned him.
That thallium poisoning.
Yeah, poisoned him.
Is she?
Just got out of prison.
Yeah.
Last year at midnight.
Well, maybe OJ's getting out today too.
Yeah, it looks like he's gonna get out.
You think he is?
I think they're gonna let him out, yeah.
9 years.
OJ,
Oh, yeah, I saw that in the paper.
yeah, I think they're gonna let him out. I don't know what he's gonna do though. He's like a man without a country. He's like Casey Anthony, you know?
Exactly.
So,
In that case, did you think Casey Anthony was guilty?
absolutely. I thought she was guilty, yes. I was shocked when they acquitted her.
Another interesting case was that Amanda Knox in Perugia. You know, all Italians think she was guilty.
Yep.
She did.
Yep.
But in the United States, you know, they said the evidence was botched. The judge came out. He was prejudiced initially. That was a very interesting story.
It was. That was an interesting case.
Now, whether or not she was complicit in it, God only knows, because the strange thing is they convicted this other man, who was a black man, and yet they said she was guilty as well, but she didn't know the black man. She had that, I forget his name,
I know who you're talking about.
her boyfriend.
Yeah, yeah. I don't know. I didn't, you know, I followed that case a little bit, but I didn't follow it real closely. So I really don't even have an opinion on whether I thought she was involved or not. I don't know. But I do want to thank everyone for coming, though. I enjoyed talking to you.
How much are your books, Tammy?
Pardon?
Would you have a list of your books for me? And how much are they?
The books are all